Start this. This is a React developer interview. I'm just trying to, mm, you know, get better at explaining my thoughts and sharing my experiences through interviews for careers that I'm interested in. So let's start.
Hello, Milind. Thank you for joining the interview today. Let's start by discussing your experience with React. Can you tell me about a project where you used React and what your role was?
Let's start with the current experience. I'm currently a product engineer at Merlin AI. I have developed a few front ends for the systems here. One particularly being chat imports using Chat GPT exports, which we can import in our application, which can then populate all the chat histories from Chat GPT to Merlin AI.
That sounds like an interesting project, Milind. Could you elaborate on how you used React in developing the chat imports feature? Specifically, I'd like to know which React concepts, such as components, state, and props, you utilized and how you implemented them.
So, in order to implement a chat import system, what we are doing is we are first of all exporting the zip from the chat GPT dashboard or the settings wherever it is available, and then importing into our application. So, in order to import, we drag and drop the zip file. So, in order to build the drag and drop experience, I developed a drag and drop container which takes in the accepted files in the described MIME types, is which is application zip.
Thank you for explaining that, Milind. It sounds like you have a good handle on creating a drag and drop feature. Could you tell me more about how you manage the state and props within your drag and drop container? How did you handle the file validation and any potential errors during the import process?
So during the drag and drop operation, the component itself handles the drag and drop operation. We used a library called React DND to handle all of that. There are event listeners on the components that automatically trigger file validation. If the file MIME type is valid, we let the file process and then send it to the API on the button click, or directly on the flow.
It's great to hear that you used React DND for handling the drag and drop operations. Can you explain how you handled any errors that might occur during the file validation or API integration? Additionally, how did you manage the state for the file data before sending it to the API?
In order to manage the file error states, I managed a global, I mean, sort of a bar that lets it define the error states or the success states, which tells the user about their file operation, whatever is happening. So if there is any error, the bar shows up and then it says incorrect file type. So that is automatically handled using the enum that is provided through the backend, which are accepted file MIME types. So that is taken care of there. And after that, we upload it to the backend and constantly poll for request for statuses that is available from the server. That is, the file is processing, it is processed, now the chat GPT exports are imported to your file and all that.
It sounds like you have a robust error handling and status update system in place. Can you explain a bit more about how you implemented the enums for file MIME types and how you set up the polling mechanism for status updates from the server? Specifically, how do you ensure that the polling does not overload the server or affect the user experience?
So, in order to manage the file types, we just maintained enum that is synchronous to the backend functionality. If the MIME type on the client side matches to the allowed MIME types, we go forward with the application flow, or we stop the application and show a toast or a error message in order to, you know, feedback for the user to try again. And coming to polling, uh, we managed um, we managed this using a React query, and there's an enabled flag. So whenever the response from the server is some sort of valid or errored out, so all these breakpoints where the status is conclusive that there is no other point of constantly being polling to the server, then we stop polling. Otherwise we keep on polling to get the status update if the state is in some intermediary state like processing, unzipping, and things like that.
Thank you for the detailed explanation, Milind. It sounds like you have a well thought out approach to managing file types and polling. Could you delve a bit deeper into how you used React Query to handle the polling mechanism? Specifically, how do you manage the intermediate states like processing and unzipping to ensure a smooth user experience?
Like I said, I once again handle this state using a small store that I created using Zustand, which has all the enums or the states that are readily supported by the server. And if the server response during the polling request is conclusive, state, let's say starting, then it keeps on starting polling to the server for, let's say, if there is an unzipping operation or processing operation, it updates the front end and shows a nice little table below of all the requests that the user has processed. And using React query, it's pretty simple because we can handle the state from our global store and set it to the enabled flagged in the React query, which polls the request to the backend server.
It's impressive how you've integrated React Query and Zustand to manage the state and polling mechanism effectively. As we move to more advanced topics, could you share how you ensure that the performance of your application remains optimal during these operations? Additionally, how do you maintain a seamless user experience, especially when dealing with large files or longer processing times?
So, regarding large files, we've capped the system according to the backend specification for the large file uploads that we support. We throw out error states for the large files that we do not support. So, during this upload process, we send it to our upload endpoint, which uploads it to the Google Cloud or the Firestore, and then send starts processing it. All the backend stuff is of course handled by the backend, but in the front end side of things, we try to manage these polling requests to a minimal. Like I said, all these conclusive states always make sure that the polling does not repetitively happens or there's no abuse in the system. So the common React optimization techniques that are required for this are, caching the uh, states for these.
It's great to hear that you've considered the backend specifications and have implemented measures to handle large files effectively. Could you elaborate on the specific React optimization techniques you mentioned, such as caching? How do you ensure that these optimizations contribute to both performance and user experience?
So what it terms of React optimization I meant was, enabling my component to have if there are heavy compute functions. I don't exactly remember the code, but But yes, the fundamental approach in optimizing any React component will be to, I mean, using use callback or use memo hooks if there are values, and if there are functions that are compute heavy, so we can, add a use callback to them. Yeah, that are the common approach.
Thank you for sharing your approach to React optimization. It's good to hear that you're using use callback and use memo to handle compute heavy functions. Can you provide a specific example from your project where you applied these optimization techniques? How did it impact the performance and user experience of your application?
So let's say if there is any value that we want to optimize, we can slap in a use memo hook in order to, if there are a lot of re-renders that are happening due to that state, if we add a use memo hook, it remembers whenever there is change in that. So that optimizes the React overall performance and makes sure that re-renders are to a minimal state.
Thank you for explaining how you use memo to optimize re-renders. It's clear that you have a good understanding of React optimization techniques. Could you share any specific challenges you faced while implementing these optimizations in your project and how you overcame them? This will help me understand your problem solving approach in real world scenarios.
So there are a lot of cases when your state is going bonkers, but then you have to understand that using a lot of global values that have side effects on your components is a bad practice. So minimizing the state depth or simplifying your state across your application is really important for us to debug as well as maintain the code efficiently. So these are the common things. But yes, during initial preparation of the implementation, I tried to keep a local state, but then easily it became a little cumbersome when you are handling a lot of other components that are there. So then you lift up the state to maybe a context, and maybe refactor it, using use it in a global state, and all sorts of things.
It's insightful to hear about the challenges you faced with state management and how you address them by lifting state and using context. What are some of the key lessons you've learned from these experiences, and what best practices would you recommend for managing state in complex React applications?
Um, in complex React applications, where there are large code bases, you need to understand the conventions and try to be consistent with the rest of the code base or the team conventions. Understanding how to architect your component so that it aligns with the team's methodology is important to have manageable code, so that your code reviews don't have other conventions that are being put on you, so that you can understand, try reading other features that are closely resembling to yours, so that you can architect beforehand in a way that is acceptable. But coming to the state management practices, try considering keeping the states to an asynchronous state manager.
It's great to hear about the importance of adhering to team conventions and consistent architecture. Could you elaborate on specific state management practices you recommend for maintaining a clean and efficient codebase in complex React applications? How do you ensure that your state management approach scales well with the application's growth?
So one thing in our team that we have is we have an asynchronous state management library that is also known as React Query, which also handles all the query caching, the mutation values using a query client. So it provides us a query client which you can, against a query key, you can get back the value which in the lifetime of the React application we have fetched on the client side. So that is a good state management solution in itself, a robust one, in fact. So whenever all these query loader states, pending states, success and error states are handled within that library code itself, so try to utilize that as much as possible. If there are any complex states, in fact, then maybe if there is some application logic that we need to implement and handle with an other let's say external libraries, let's say text editors or other sorts of things that require these states to be mutated on the client, then maybe make some local state or decide to lift up the state and maybe do some prop drilling first and maybe see how many re-renders these applications have. Use React Scan as a library to visually check how many re-renders your application is doing, check the state, if there is requirement to lift up state even more, then maybe make a global store and then use it.
Thank you for sharing your team's approach to state management using React Query and other practices. It sounds like you have a solid system in place. Looking ahead, what future improvements or enhancements do you envision for your state management approach to ensure it continues to scale well with the application's growth? How do you plan to address any potential challenges that might arise?
So, problem solving is something that we do on a daily basis. If there are issues with our front end or the client side implementation, we make sure that it should perform well in the first. Top priority, and then apart from that refactor so that other team members can easily contribute to the application and understand the code really well, make atomic components, atomic states, and use them all across. Yeah, that sort of philosophy we have.
It sounds like you have a well structured approach to problem solving and maintaining a scalable code base. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to discuss or any questions you have about the role or the company?
Yeah, I'm interested about the other conventions that the company follows, and try to learn from it and then envision.
Our company places a strong emphasis on code quality, maintainability, and collaboration. We follow best practices such as code reviews, consistent coding standards, and thorough documentation. We also encourage the use of design patterns and modular architecture to ensure scalability and reusability. Continuous learning and knowledge sharing are highly valued, so we regularly hold tech talks and code workshops. If you have any specific questions about our conventions or processes, feel free to ask.
No, that'll be enough. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time, Milind. It was great to hear about.
Hello. How are you? I